grew up in Ontario, Canada, and I spent most of my time in Eastern Ontario, which is an area that has a lot of lakes and rivers and forests. And as a young kid, my brothers and sisters and I spent a lot of our summers canoeing on the lakes and camping in the forest. And so I was really fortunate to have had a lot of experience in the outdoors as a kid. I went to university and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't, I took some classes and I wasn't really excited about them, but in my fourth year of university, I had an experience or an opportunity to work as a research assistant for Irina Creed, who was a professor at the university. And it was a summer fieldwork job, and she handed me some scientific instruments and said, your job this summer is to walk around the forest and figure out where the water is going and what that means for the greenhouse gases in the forest. And I just thought it was the most wonderful job anyone could ever give me. It was such a cool opportunity. And what kept me going with it was I found that I was really interested in figuring out the sort of puzzle of how ecosystems work, and particularly how what impacts the water that's in streams and lakes. So that was a really sort of formative experience, and it took me out of the classroom and showed me the sorts of things you could do in the field. So that was sort of my how I got into the field, for sure. So my job right now is I'm a professor at the University of Winnipeg. I'm the Canada Research Chair in Environmental Influences on Water Quality. And so the research that we do in our group investigates how things that humans do on the landscape impacts the water quality of streams and lakes and wetlands. And we kind of have two areas of focus. One area is in agricultural systems, looking at what types of practices farmers do on fields and how that can help both ensure the food security that we need, so that crops can grow and we can produce food, but also so that it's done in a way where excess nutrients and pollutants don't make their way into the water systems. The other focus of the work that we do is looking at how climate change impacts streams in the boreal forest. In Canada, the boreal forest covers a really, really large swath of our landscape, and contains big stores of carbon. And as the climate changes, it's really impacting the ways that water moves across the landscape. And we need to understand how that water movement changes, because it impacts if the carbon stays in the ground, if it moves to streams and lakes, or if it goes back up to the atmosphere. So those are two different human activities and two different types of systems, but the overarching theme is how can we understand the ecosystems better to help make management decisions that'll protect streams and lakes. And I could say my favorite part about my job, and the part that I think is the most impactful, is that I get to work with really wonderful collaborators, and particularly really wonderful students and trainees. They sometimes, working in water or climate change or any kind of environmental field, can be a little bit depressing, because we're always trying to deal with these big problems that we have. And the thing that gives me hope and energy is getting to work with young people who have optimism and ideas and energy and enthusiasm, and are at a point in their career where they're just taking off and are about to go and make big changes in the world. So I think that's the most impactful part, and it's certainly my favorite part. the way that I feel successful, or the way that I judge success for myself, is by doing work that is meaningful to other people. And that can happen in a variety of ways. One way that can happen is by working in partnerships with communities and NGOs and nonprofits, folks who are really connected to the landscape and want to make a difference and need some assistance with the sort of technical part of the issue that they're having. And I think that is impactful and successful because it helps shape the scientific questions that we ask and helps move the results that we find into the hands of people who can make decisions. And the other way I define success is by the number of students who I train, or the students who I get to work with. I always say I am sort of it's an unbelievable kind of silly privilege to get to work with students, because they come to me at this point and they say, I'm really worried about the environment. I'm really worried about climate change. I don't know what to do. And you catch them at this moment where they're just about to take off, and you get to help them develop some of those skills that it's really going to send them shooting off. And so that's another way in which I would define success. Yeah, I had a student named Danny who really just had taken some courses and wasn't doing very well, had not very high marks, and she decided that she wanted to she applied for a job working in a northern town in Canada, in a really, really remote place. And she came to my office and she said, I really think that I can do this. People have told me, oh, you can't be a scientist, you didn't do well in chemistry, or you, for whatever reason, you're not going to succeed, but I really, really feel like I can do this. And so I connected her with someone who I knew who worked up there, and she went up and worked at this research center for the summer, and came back down after the summer just a totally different person, just really, really motivated, really saw clearly where she was going to go with her life, and what she wanted to do with her work. She did a couple more summers of research for us up in Churchill, Manitoba, and has now gone on to do a PhD at the University of Guelph, doing this really, really cool work on invertebrates in ponds, but also working really closely with Indigenous youth in the northern communities she's working with, and helping them to understand the ways in which the ecosystems work up there. So I just had, for whatever reason, caught her at that moment where she needed someone to sort of believe in her and set her up with a couple of opportunities, and she took it and just, as you said, was a rocket ship. I think I would say two things. I would say the thing that gives your work meaning is being able to do work that aligns with your values. And so again, for me, those values have to do with working with other people, working with students and trainees, and helping to give opportunities to people who haven't necessarily had opportunities in the past. And the more that you can shape your career to work on those things that you really value, the happier you're going to be. And the other thing I think I would say is that, when I was going through school, there were not necessarily a lot of women working in physical sciences. There wasn't a lot of opportunity to kind of see myself in that kind of role. But to say, if you keep at it and seek out role models, you'll be able to sort of build up a community of people who you can work with and who will support you. I don't know if this is exactly a mantra, but I think this is maybe an answer to a different question of yours. But the in my personal life, my real kind of hero and inspiration is my grandmother, who worked her whole life for human rights and women's rights, and didn't start working until she was in her 40s, because at the time it wasn't a time when women worked outside the house, and so worked she worked really passionately and tirelessly for many decades on human rights issues across Canada and across the world. And I think one of the reasons why I was really attracted to working with water and in the environment is because I think a lot of these environmental issues that we face today are human rights issues. They're issues of unequal access to resources and problems that are unequally distributed across the world. So I think if there's like a guiding principle, it's to work towards justice in sort of whatever way is possible. That's not really a quote though, but she went to university, which was sort of unusual, and she became a minister. And at that time, the church wouldn't let you work as a minister if you were married. And so she was married to my grandfather, who was also a minister. And she really got started sort of supporting his work and working with the community that he was working in, and working as a community organizer, so doing sort of unpaid work outside of the house. And she's just always been someone who's been really interested in issues of justice and issues of lifting people up and providing opportunities and access where they haven't existed. And so just everywhere where she lived, she found these groups to join, and these networks to join, until eventually she was able to sort of work outside the house. So she's a cool lady. Mm-hmm. So the even though the field that I work in is when women are an underrepresented group, I was incredibly fortunate, and I had a series of really three very strong female role models and mentors. Irina Creed was my master's supervisor, and then I did my PhD with a woman named Catherine Eimers, and then I did a postdoctoral fellowship with a woman named Emily Stanley. And I think one of the real value of being able to work with three different women is that each of them have their own strengths and their own worldview and their own way of doing science and their own way of living their lives. And being exposed to a diversity of women really helped me see what my place could be and how I could both live my life and be a scientist. And so I think about that a lot in situations where there's only one woman, only one person of color, only one Indigenous person. That's great, but I think for young people to be able to see themselves, you need more than one example, so that you can take different things, from different people, and see the path that you would like to make for yourself. So one of the I think it's not enough just to have a few people from those types of groups. You need many people, and you need many people living their lives in a variety of ways, and that's how you'll kind of attract young people and inspire them to continue on the path. I think the first thing is in science, you get a lot of criticism and a lot of a lot of feedback that can be negative at times. And I think the first thing that I always try to do when I receive criticism is to understand that it's if it's criticism of the work that we're doing, it's that someone is seeing the work from a different perspective and is trying to strengthen it. And even if they're not always coming at it from that good-hearted way, is there something that some lesson that you can take from the criticism or the rejection or the feedback and apply it to make the work better. I think the other thing that helps sort of keep me grounded is to have a network of people, both at work and in my personal life, who I can talk to, who I can explain what the situation is, and who can remind me that it's not the end of the world. I think in two ways. I think there are choices that you can make in the ways that you live your life. Choices like living close to where you work so that you can walk and cycle. Choices like eating food that's from close to where you live so that it has lesser environmental impact. And I think those personal choices are important and are helpful. The other thing you can do is to talk to decision makers, talk to politicians, vote for politicians. We're going to put in place policies that support a sustainable lifestyle. And you can, in my case, do research on water that can help make evidence-based decisions that can support policies that'll help sustainability. So I think the individual choices are important, but to me, the real changes for sustainability are going to come from systemic change. And so I try to put energy into also that, talking to decision makers and supporting politicians who support sustainable choices. So I'm in this really wonderful position of being able to mentor students, and so I teach classes to undergraduate and graduate students, and that's a real opportunity to highlight work done by people of all genders, of all ethnicities, from different parts of the world, to break out of the idea that the only science that's done is done by old white men from Western countries. So that's one way through my teaching, and then in my research group, to try to promote an environment where people have the supports that they need to be able to participate in the research. And that can really vary depending on the person and the types of barriers or challenges that they might face. It could be something like having meetings at times of day that work for people who have to pick their kids up from school or drop them off. It could be talking to people with physical disabilities about what kinds of accommodations would make working in a lab more comfortable. I had a student this semester who had a concussion and so needed to work in sort of a darker environment. So we figured out an accommodation that way. So making and not just working on those individual accommodations, but creating an environment where people feel like they're supported and they can ask for what they need. We've had at the University of Winnipeg, there just happened to be two really excellent soil scientists who are from Sri Lanka and were trained there. And so we had a few years ago an opportunity to write a partnership grant between our department and the Department of Soil Science at the University of Peradeniya, looking at transferability of sustainable agriculture between the two countries, which is kind of, there's a lot of differences between the type of agriculture that we do on the Canadian prairies and the type of agriculture that's done in Sri Lanka. But some of the practices, particularly around nutrient management, so making sure that the nutrients stay in the soil for the plants as opposed to going to the stream, some of those practices are transferable. And so for 2 or 3 years, we had scientists from Peradeniya coming to our university and working on research projects here. And then I and a couple of other scientists from here had the opportunity to go over there and work on some projects, work with students, give public lectures, visit field sites. And it was wonderful. And the project was supposed to go all the way to the end of 2021, and it got really interrupted by the pandemic. I was in Sri Lanka in March 2020 and had to fly home. But the funding agency said, well, you know, if there's a way that you can continue to do this project remotely, we could continue to support it. And we said, great, we'll do that. And so we set up a sort of virtual working group where we had the folks from Sri Lanka working on a project. We would send the sample bottles and the reagents over to them. They would send the samples back to us for analysis. They hired field assistants in Sri Lanka. We figured out a way to pay them from Canada. So it was a real kind of logistically complicated situation through the pandemic, but it was really exciting to sort of work out a way to continue to collaborate, to continue to share these scientific ideas without being able to physically be together, and is probably a good model going forward of how you might continue to do that remotely. I think that as we come out of this pandemic moment or move through the sort of first urgent phase of the pandemic, there's a cohort of students who are so hungry to get their hands dirty. They want to be back in the classroom, back talking to each other, back getting the sort of practical experience. And so it's a really exciting moment because people have all this pent-up excitement and energy. So one of the things I'm really looking forward to is working with students who are coming out of this period of remote learning with all of this excitement and enthusiasm.